Hi.
Hi.
So we're just heading to the Highway 30 right now to look into. I guess there was an issue that came up about the land, and that people are saying that it's been earmarked for economic development. That the Mohawk Council already has plans to do.
Truck stop, I heard.
Yeah. So I did talk to Joe Delarone really quickly about the truck stop gas station issue, and he said that economic development is definitely not going to come through the Mohawk Council, that it's Dewadoni Zakta's job to look at those things. It's Dewadoni Zakta's job, through their communications team, to inform the community of things that they're working on. And it's unfortunate because, as a journalist, I can say that Dewa has a very weak communications initiative. They don't talk about a lot of the things that they're doing. And so when people find out that they may have different projects that they're working on, of course it seems suspicious. It's because why the first time we're hearing about this? But I mean, on the flip side of that, there's also initiatives that have to take place in research and development before you can launch anything to the community. You can't just go to the community and say, oh, by the way, we have this project that we're working on, and you're not able to answer questions. But the other thing is that we need another economy in this community, and it's Dewadoni Zakta's job to look into it. Maybe if people aren't happy, then they need to make some sort of a community board, do it themselves. I think we need to put in a call at Dewadoni Zakta. I know it's been nearly 2 weeks since I sent their communications officer a request to do an interview with Bud Morris, to have them on the show to talk about what they presented at the community meeting. I ran into Bud Morris myself at Goodleaf's Convenience and said, I put in a request to do an interview with you. I'm not saying that they're dodging me, but I'm just saying that it's been 2 weeks and I still haven't heard from them. So when I ask to do an interview, it's because, community members are talking and they want answers. So that's my job as a journalist, plain and simple. It's not personal. I need to get the information. If you want the information out there, then you talk to the media. If you don't, then we're going to still do our job, and you're going to have the chance to comment. So boo-hoo if you don't like the story, Anyway, so we're just on Highway 30, and we're heading out here just to take a look at the land and whatever, so I'll catch up with you in a bit.
All right.
Okay, bye. Okay, so on this week's show, we're going to be looking at some of these issues. The Highway 30. There was a big announcement made by the Grand Chief several weeks ago and the Mohawk Council that so many hectares were returned to Kahnawake. And there was a big, issue with the surrounding communities in terms of what was coming back to Kahnawake. And it was kind of funny because it was land that, they're all on our property as it is. So why are they making an issue? This is what some community members were discussing. They couldn't believe that, the audacity, if you will. So now, from what I understand, it runs along Highway 30, and it's already connecting to land that we have. So if it's 100 feet in, that's the land that's coming back. We haven't been, Mohawk TV or Kahnawake 411 media hasn't been told otherwise that there is any plans, specific plans for economic development. What I do know is that there are projects that could be potentially worked on in Kahnawake by Dewadoni Zakta in terms of creating economic development. And that's what I was just discussing, on the phone. We're also going to be doing an interview with a traditional person from the 207 Longhouse regarding the statement that was made from the Grand Council to the elected council chiefs. It wasn't just in Kahnawake, it's part of the Haudenosaunee community, so I know that this letter was delivered across the territories. And we're hoping to get something from the Mohawk Council. This much I know is that they haven't made a statement. So I did put in an email to Joe Delarone, which is the political attaché at Mohawk Council, to ask for an interview with the Grand Chief or whoever was designated to deal with this. I know that the letter was delivered to Lloyd Phillips at the beginning. I emailed him. He never called me back either. I don't know if it's because he wasn't the one that needed to deal with it, or just because. Anyway, so 2 weeks now we've been waiting. So hopefully we get something this week would be nice. I know there's a lot of issues going on in the community, so Mohawk TV, as reporters, we try to do a lot of things. We also have the website that you can tune into, which is kahnawake411.com. It's kind of like a daily update, but it also offers a lot of things like press releases, feature stories, sports coverage, things like that. So go to the website. There's also a lot of information on there. So right now we're going to head over to the Longhouse to start with the Grand Council story. Meantime, we'll see what other stories we can get done and discuss. So let's go to the 207. We'll start there. Okay, so Wajas, could you give us a little bit of history on the Grand Council and why the letters come out at this point? We'll start with a little bit of the history.
Well, the historical context of this letter that came out goes back as far as when elected councils were imposed in all of our communities right across Haudenosaunee country. But it was really back in 1991 when the Grand Council had met to discuss on how do we decolonize ourselves within all of our communities, within all of our nations. And so during that time, the Confederacy leadership had met, and they had agreed that there was 8 starting points that were the jurisdiction of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And they felt that these were the 8 points that needed to be addressed first in order to begin to decolonize ourselves. And they had told the elected councils that in order to begin the work to rid the Indian Act out of our communities, it wasn't just to create a working relationship, it was to actually decolonize ourselves so that our communities went back to original governments. So that was back in 1991, and I know there is some misinformation that's out there saying that the position was just a discussion, it was never passed, but talking with the condoled leadership, Dehanat Gardina being one of them, he was the Bear Clan chief, he basically said that he was there, and from that time, it was agreed upon. Everybody agreed to it, and it was said at that time that these are the 8 points that needed to be addressed first. And there was really, I don't know where things went from there. Back in 2007, they had reiterated their position, saying that we still hold by those 8 points, that they are part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, they are within our jurisdiction. And here within the community of Kahnawake, our house here, we had met with the Band Council some years ago to begin this discussion. Contrary to what's being put out there, we were told, well, we were even promised at that meeting that an official response would be given to continue the dialogue further. No official response ever came back, and it's just been, from there it was just left. There was no further discussion on the matters. The only thing we had heard was there was 4 points that could be agreed upon, and there was 4 points that needed further discussion, or they couldn't really recognize that that was within the jurisdiction of the Confederacy.
Was that a meeting that had taken place here with the Grand Chief in about 3 years ago? Or?
Yeah, it was around that time.
Okay, so nothing still from the Mohawk Council?
Nothing.
Okay. So now, has the Mohawk Council responded to this letter, or do you want to discuss a little bit of the letter first?
Well, as of yet, just to answer your first question, we haven't received any official response here in Kahnawake. I'm not sure about the other communities throughout Haudenosaunee country, whether or not the elected councils have given any type of response. But the letter itself, it took a lot of time, it took discussion, it took a lot of ideas bouncing off of each other. All of the leadership was aware of this, that this letter was going to be put forward at the Grand Council level. And when it was brought there, it was brought forward by the Mohawk Nation to begin addressing. And the discussion that had happened at Grand Council was the rest of the nation said that this isn't just a Mohawk issue. We're all dealing with this problem, that elected councils are overstepping their bounds. And so what was decided there was everybody wanted to sign on to this letter, because everybody agreed that we're all dealing with this same internal issue within all of our communities of the elected councils overstepping their bounds politically. And so everybody signed on to this, and even on the state side, they're dealing with the same thing with the tribal councils, with the National Congress of the American Indians, who are a lot like the AFN, but on the state side.
Right.
And so everybody had agreed that now is the time that the Confederacy does need to put its foot down in the areas of governance, and really needs to start looking at these things and how we can begin to decolonize our communities. And that's how this letter really came about. And the reason why now, just to add to that, is we had gotten word that the Iroquois caucus was moving toward going to the international arena now. There was a meeting happening in Alta, Norway, where members of the Iroquois caucus, not necessarily here from Kahnawake, but because they're saying they're one body now, and they had members, so they all had to be aware that members of their caucus were going to Alta. I believe that they're not going to be sending members now for whatever reason, I don't know. But we had also heard out of these meetings that the mayor here in Kahnawake, he had expressed interest in going to New York next year to the meeting that's going to be happening at the UN. So just these things of them taking these steps into that international arena are showing that they're further overstepping their bounds. And the whole time that they're doing this, they're using language like Turo, they're using language like Mohawk Nation, using our treaties, using our language like the Great Law, and all of these different things in their negotiations. So really the Confederacy just got real tired of that, because it sends mixed messages to the outside as to who are our governments, who are our representatives, and who are supposed to be dealing in these different areas. And there, like I said earlier, there's been really no work at all, or no dialogue really happening on the elected council's ends to really address the issue of true decolonization. It's been a whole lot of talk of traditional form of government, but we're not just looking at a traditional form of government. It's a lot in the same lines as how the United States and Canada will use self-government as opposed to self-determination. It's all in the language of it. And so a traditional form of government just means that it mimics a traditional system. But what we have to look at is exactly this. What the letter says is that we have relationships together through the clans, through the nations, through the councils that bind us all together as the Confederacy, the original Confederacy. And there's really no half measures here. There's no, well, we can accept this, but we can't accept that, because right there is showing that there's not really a true drive to see that happen, and for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of the negotiations that are happening on their end, I don't know. But the Confederacy has felt that it's now time to make that cut again, to say, this is who we are, this is within our jurisdiction, and the elected councils have to recognize that and stop overstepping their bounds and stepping on any toes.
What is the alternative in terms of if they don't respond, if there's no further process in terms of them accepting this position?
Well, the letter that went to them, and I really can't give a definite answer to that, because there's still further discussion that does need to happen on the Confederacy end. I'm only saying this like reporting what has happened already. I can't really report as to what will happen, because the discussion needs to happen further, and it needs to go through the clans and go through the process until an official response to further will come out. This is just another reiteration, it's another warning, and the possibility of it going to the general public, letting the Canadian government know officially, letting the US government, letting the international world know that this is exactly who they are. And so that when they do go out there, that anytime they use Turo, Mohawk Nation, Confederacy, Great Law, they're doing so on an illegal basis. Really, this letter went to them, asking them, telling them, enough is enough now. And if they're going to continue along with whatever agenda they have, then further steps will have to be taken.
Okay. Has there been any reaction from here in Kahnawake that you know of, like from the Mohawk Council?
Nothing officially has come out, aside from the article last week where the real focus seemed to have been on just the 8 points of jurisdiction, but this letter isn't just talking about the 8 points. It's talking about that because it's saying that these need to be discussed in order to decolonize. But really what the main, like I said earlier, the main point of this letter was telling them to cease and desist. None of that was really talked about. It didn't come out from the Mohawk Council on what their reaction is to being told that they can no longer use this language, they can no longer use these things in their negotiating, in their communiques and whatever else. And so there's been really nothing, nothing from them up to this point.
Okay.
As a community, we really need to ask ourselves, where do we want to go into the future? You know, we have to recognize that there is a lot of division within our community at this point. That goes back historically, it goes back to the politics of things, but we really do need to look at what is going to make us stronger. Because when we do talk about the Great Law, we do talk about that Deotni Jokwan Huxta, which is the circle wampum, and everything that lies within there. Our laws, our language, our culture, everything that makes us as indigenous sovereign people. It comes down to the question of, do we want to be Mohawks of Kahnawake through the Indian Act system and enjoy the rights and privileges that are given to us through the Indian Act only, or do we want to truly go back to being a sovereign people who are going to determine our future without having Canada or the United States look over our shoulder and tell us you can or can't do this? And so that's going to take a lot of work, though. That's going to take a lot of minds coming together. That's going to take a lot of internal exploration on people's part. It's going to take a lot of change that we're really not used to right now as a whole community. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be something that's going to be a totally easy transition. And I don't want to try to shoot the idea down before it even goes any further. But really, it's going to be up to the community, who is also going to ultimately decide this is the direction we want to go in. And they have to understand that whatever decisions are made on the political front will have a huge impact on us and our children and our grandchildren because of everything that's coming down the pipes right now from the federal governments on both ends, through the negotiations happening on the elected councils and everything else. So we really, really need to take this seriously and put a lot of energy into it so that we can see a better future for our kids.
Right.
And not to just talk about it in a rhetorical sense. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of good ideas, bad ideas, but the work has to start yesterday.
I know that there's been a lot of, I guess, discussion or debate about, you know, what would happen, you know, how would it look like. I think a lot of things sometimes tend to be based on the unknown or the fear, but where would the process actually start? Would it be in each community to do it as their own, or would it go back again to discussion to the Grand Council?
Well, what ends up happening a lot is we tend to like to put our eggs all in one basket. We like to focus on just one end or another. It's on all areas, it's on all fronts. We need the work, we need the people within the communal level to begin that process. We need the national level to do that process, and we need the confederacy level. So these are all different levels of government that we need participation at. We need people to be actively involved and understanding what are our protocols, what are our rights, what are our ways. That's going to take a lot for people to understand, you know, because a lot aren't used to it for whatever reason, you know, maybe not having been raised around it or understanding it. And there is a lot of the fear-based when approaching it, when people don't really know about it.
Right.
And we have to get past that too, because that's a symptom of the colonization that happened to us. To be afraid of our own culture, to be afraid of our own government, to be afraid of our ways. And so that work has to happen on all kinds of levels. It has to happen on an individual level with yourself. It has to happen on a collective level It has to happen within our families. It's not just one thing that you're going to tweak here and tweak there. It's on all levels that this is a huge societal shift that we have to look at. And it's a personal action that's taken on people's part to say, this is how we're going to see this forward.
I noticed in the letter too, towards the end they had talked about, or they had written that it wasn't a personal issue, you know, that they weren't calling down the people that are in the, you know, are chose to be employed within the band council system. I think that in itself says a lot.
Well, a lot of people like to personalize these things, especially when it becomes political. We're real good at that, you know, in our communities, we're real good at that. We just have to get past that too. People have to get past the personalities too. And what it's looking at is the system itself, what it was designed for, why it was implemented, and really that it's doing the job that it was set out to do. Not only here in Kahnawake, but right across the country, you know. So people have to stop taking it personal and seeing that we're all in this too. And they have to also make a choice, whether or not they're going to continue to fight for an imposed colonial system within our communities, and whether or not they're going to continue to fight for what the outside will allow us to do as far as it can take it, you know. Our ways takes a lot of work, our ways will take a lot of struggle getting our things forward. As people who know, who practice, who travel on our passports, who travel with our documentation, they know that it's a fight because the federal governments on both sides would much rather have traditional governments, original governments, gone and elected bodies in place as the governing authorities. This was even reiterated this past week in New York, where the United States had said that self-determination is different from the international description as to what the United States believes self-determination is. So when we're looking at even the international body, they're pushing it at that level, that they're going to dictate how far we take it through our elected councils. And you even have elected council people on the state side pushing for having them to be the recognized bodies within our communities. So it falls into the trap of assimilation. And we really need to look at that. We really need to look at these things and how people are bringing us down that route. Again, I'm not saying that people here within this community are, but if there are, they have to recognize that this is the route that they're taking us, is falling into that trap of assimilation, whether it's through the laws, whether it's through land management, whether it's through citizenship, or as they can put it, membership.
I think that sometimes people may feel that, and I myself included, I didn't grow up with this type of, you know, political awareness, if you will. I come to Longhouse on occasion, but I think just personally, it's very profound, and I think the fear is definitely could be a major issue in people not understanding, not growing up that way, or, you know, even with that, it seems like a really big undertaking to try to, you know, move back to original governance when you have a lot of people in the community that don't understand it.
Yeah, even that in the language, you know, that we use, move back to. It's moving forward to. Whenever we say that, moving back, it's like we're moving backwards. People usually come with that mentality of, oh, we're going to move backwards, we're going to have to give up our car, we're going to have to give this up, we're going to have to give that up. What do they want us to do? Go walk in the bush and live off fruits and berries and things like that. And
We'd be a lot healthier.
we would be a lot healthier, and the planet would be too. But these are things that we have to look at of this moving forward. What is it to move forward as an Indigenous people from an Indigenous perspective, an Indigenous worldview? Or are we just ethnically Mohawk? You know, when people walk in, it's like, what's your ethnicity? Oh, I'm a Mohawk, and I'm a proud Mohawk. But what is it that, what's the foundation of that pride in ourselves? Is it just the blood that we were born into this? I always go back on a story when I had traveled down to Bolivia, and one of the elders down there had asked the question, what makes you Indigenous up there? They says, down here we know who Indigenous people are by the way we live, by the language that we speak, by the way we treat the natural world. They says, how do you know who's indigenous? Those of you who are in the belly of the beast. And it really made me think. And they asked, are you still indigenous? Do you still follow your ways? Are your people still connected to the natural world? Do you still protect it and show it the gratitude that you're supposed to? And I had to say yeah and no. And these are a lot, again, internal questions that we have to ask ourselves.
And it depends on,
on
the person.
And it all goes back to education. You know, people need to learn about who they are. They need to learn their ways. They need to know the history. It's going to be a painful exploration on a lot of parts, you know, because of what we've been through. Our history is one that is littered with heartbreak and genocide and holocausts, and that's all there. But here we still are, and it's going to take a lot of struggle within ourselves to sift through all that's happened to us. And those of us who are the inheritors of that pain, the inheritors of that hurt, you know, and we're really just going to have to look at that and say, well, what's worth carrying on? Are there certain pains and scars worth keeping that made us stronger, that made us more resilient? Or is it just further internalized oppression, internalized racism? And these are things that we really have to look at. And like I said, it's not going to be easy. It's not like the same thing as decolonizing ourselves as a community, as a nation. It's not going to be easy, but it's not impossible either.
Right. Okay, and just quickly to wrap it up, what is the next step at this point?
Is yet to be seen. We haven't heard from the elected councils end, but the next steps from the traditional councils, from the confederacies end, is the continuing of moving forward for all of our people, for all of our communities. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on all areas. The Confederacy is on the move, and more participation that we have will make it even stronger to move forward. And so we just have to wait and see.
Where can anyone get information about the Grand Council, like in terms of what they're doing, what they do, where they send people, things like that? Is there like a website, or is it just through your longhouse in your community?
Both. You could go on the Onondaga Nation. Periodically they'll post things about what's happening on the Confederacy's end. And also just, you know, getting involved, asking people, hey, you know, what's happening?
Right.
Word of mouth and through that.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's more on this story. Right now we just finished here at the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. Didn't get to do a sit-down interview with the Grand Chief because according to Mike DeLille, the Mohawk Council has a statement that is forthcoming. He says that the table has mandated him and Chief Christine Diom-Zachary to look into the statement. They're looking at a bit of the history, and a statement will be made back to the Grand Council. So that's all we have right now from the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. We'll keep you posted. I think that once the Mohawk Council does make a statement, we're going to be sitting down with the Grand Chief and Christine to discuss the statement that they're going to make. So it may not be in the next few days during this broadcast, but sometime next week, hopefully, we'll be back here on air. So we, of course, as always, I hope you enjoyed the program. And tune in to Kahnawake411.com, and of course, Kahnawake Mohawk Television. We're your community station, and we will keep you informed. Mohawk TV encompasses all of the organizations, including our town, which is what you're watching now. So see you later.
Ganyak ke haga tadi adaraste kayerniga hiadu zewaderoru.